What's up YouTube, Keystone Aquatics here, and today we're bringing you a new video here, and we're going to talk about setting up your first freshwater aquarium, which we'll talk about in this episode. Later on I might do saltwater. So yeah, first off, what we always want to do is we want to first off measure, and we have to plan out where we're going to put our tank. We kind of have to figure out what stand we're going to do, because we have to make sure that that stand is going to be able to hold the weight of the tank itself. And you have to remember that we usually say 1 gallon of water equals about 8 pounds, rough estimate on that. Yeah, but we also have to take into consideration that it's better to have as much water volume as possible whenever you first start out, just because if something goes wrong in your tank, you have a lot of water volume to actually wash down any issues. So for example, if you have a lot of ammonia or you have a lot of nitrite right off the bat, and you have a lot of water volume to kind of dilute that so that it's not too toxic to the fish, even though we really don't want that in your aquarium at all. You can at least catch problems quicker before they actually start to turn into big, huge problems. So that's kind of step one. As far as what I've done with this tank that we're going to kind of be taking a look at, it's only a 10 gallon back there. I wanted to do a planted tank, and I'm going to actually be copying a design and taking inspiration from, I guess you could say. On Dustin Aquarium's video, there was an aquascape contest that he did, and I saw one of the aquariums, I think it was the one that actually won. It looked pretty cool, so I wanted to do a scape that was kind of similar. I like the fact that he did use sand and also, I'm guessing, eco-complete at the same time in the same aquarium, so I'm going to be taking inspiration from that. We'll be doing a scape similar to that. So that's kind of the idea for this tank, and I wanted to have a 10 gallon to do it in, and plus the 10 gallon fit perfectly with the stand that I have, and I know for a fact it'll be able to support the weight. That it's both the 10 gallons. I have my saltwater pointing to the left of me. I have both of these 10 gallons before, so I know for a fact that it'll be able to support the weight on that one. So as far as step number 2 goes, we have to we also have to, whenever we look for our stand, we have to buy correctly. So for example, if you look at Craigslist in your area, yes, they do have a lot of very good deals on their website, but you also have to take into consideration the fact that that tank could be cracked. So before you even buy it, it's a good idea to ask them if they would fill the tank up completely, just to make sure that there are no cracks in the aquarium, so that you have no water leakage. That way you're not wasting your money on something that you'd have to try to silicone up. You don't want to do that, so make sure that you see the tank in advance, and also that it has no water leakage in it in general. And then as far as step number 3 goes, what we're going to look at is we're going to look at the substrate. Now for this particular project, we're going to be using sand, and also we're going to be using Eco-Complete, which is a type of planted substrate. It has a lot of plant supplement in it, so that the plants can easily, they can grow quicker, and they can kind of just take off from the get-go. It's pretty helpful in that regard. The sand is more for aesthetic reasons. A lot of people starting out their first aquarium, though, I know that gravel versus sand is kind of the big debate as far as that goes. And I will say that gravel is a lot easier to clean as opposed to sand, but sand has some advantages, such as chloric acid. If you have them, then you're not going to have any bacterial infections on their whiskers. It's just a lot of bottom-dwelling fish do kind of prefer the sand. The only thing is you might get some detritus, which is just kind of like a buildup of waste that turns into bacteria, and it's kind of not aesthetically pleasing, which is why I'd say for most beginners, I'd say just stick with the gravel. Unless you're trying to do a planted tank, then you could do the gravel, but if you're trying to do like a heavily planted one with some advanced plants, then I would either suggest to dirt your tank, which for beginners is not a great option. So whenever you put dirt below the gravel itself, but that can become dirty, and if you don't do it correctly, your entire tank is going to basically be busted, and you're going to have dirty water the entire time. So it's not a great idea for beginners. I can show you how to dirt a tank on the next video or something, but it's not the best idea for beginners to do. You can do that, or you can just stick with Eco-Complete like I'm using, which is just a plant substrate that you don't have to rinse out. It's not going to leach anything that's going to make your water look undesirable or anything like that. So that's probably, gravel's the best thing to go for most beginners, I would say. And at that, you also have to have your gravel back. because you want to do water changes once a week, but you also have to make sure that you get the uneaten food and the fish poop and debris that kind of builds up in the gravel. You want to make sure that you suction that out so that it doesn't become toxic ammonias and things like that. You want to make sure you're trying to do that as close to a week as possible. And as far as what a water siphon looks like, it's going to be this baby here. You can get it at your LFS, local fish store, or even if you just Petland, PetSmart, whatever the big like box stores are, they'll always have the siphon there. For a 10-gallon, that's probably a little overkill, but it's up to you what you prefer to do. That'll suction out more water at a time as opposed to a smaller one, but it's just up to personal preference really as far as that goes. As far as step number 4, we're going to be looking at heat. Now, as far as what heat you're using, it's all going to really depend on the type of fish that you want to use in your aquarium. For example, I have goldfish and I don't run a heater on that because goldfish don't really like warm water. They prefer colder temperature water. Because the warm water, like, it makes their metabolism go faster and they live shorter lives in general, so it's just not a good idea to do on them. But the tank that I'm going to be running, I am going to run a heater on it because most of the fish are tropical for the most part. I have some neon tetras that they do kind of prefer colder water in a way. I think like 76 degrees is kind of what they prefer. I'm probably going to be running at 76, even though that's kind of the high end for them. But they should be more than comfortable in that temperature. I don't think it'll be a problem for them. But yeah, we always have to take the heat into consideration. And then as far as step number 5 goes, we have our filtration. What I'm going to be using is actually, I'm going to have my favorite brand, and it's great for beginners, is AquaClear. I'm going to be using an AquaClear 50, which in a way might be overkill, but as far as AquaClear goes, I think they do overestimate their product. That's going to be AquaClear right there. I'll show you whenever it's fully set up. I really think a 50 is perfect for a 10-gallon. I think a 30 is probably a little bit less. As far as beginners go, I think it's a good idea to stick to more filtration rather than less. Just because if you ever feed too much, then you'll at least have something to kind of back you up on. So it's a good idea to do more filtration, not less. That's just the way to go, so I decided to do the 50, and I've been using the 50 on a lot of my 10 gallons. It's just, yeah, it's a great filter, it's a great brand, especially for beginners, so that's the filtration that I like. Always make sure that you have a lot of adequate filtration. And another point is also flow. In planted aquariums, it's a good idea to have at least some flow in your aquarium, which is what this power head is. It's going to add some flow to the aquarium so that algae doesn't build up on the plants themselves, which can be detrimental to their growth. It can cut down on the light that they actually are absorbing, so it's a good idea to. And also something that's going to be a little bit related to the flow in your aquarium is there's air stones, and if you have air pumps, that's good at oxygenating the water, but in planted aquariums, it's not a good idea to use it because plants like to have CO2. Whenever you add oxygen to the water, kind of depletes the CO2 from the water, so it's detrimental to the plants, so you don't really want to use CO2 in a planted aquarium. But if you have a tank that's not heavily planted or one that's really not planted at all, then it's a good idea to use it. For example, if you have a goldfish tank, goldfish really like that rich oxygen water, so it's always a great idea to use it on tanks that don't really have a lot of plants in them. So that's also another thing that's kind of related to filtration and flow. Next we have step number 6. We're going to be looking at lighting, and obviously on the tank that's going to be planted, you want to have a good decent light on it. So as far as the lighting goes, we are going to be using a T8 bulb, which I'm not planning on using like growing dwarf tiers or anything that's going to require a large amount of light, but you also have to keep in mind that every plant is different and every plant requires a different amount of light. For the most part, a lot of the carpeting plants that grow fairly short, they usually like to have a lot of light in comparison to other plants because in nature they're used to being in shallow waters where they are hit with a lot of direct sunlight and not as much water to kind of dilute the amount of light that hits to them. So you have to keep that in mind whenever you're setting up your tank. You have to research the plants that you're adding. You have to make sure that your light's going to be strong enough. And the great thing is with your T8 light fixtures, it's very customizable as far as which light that you're going to be using. The light that I'm going to be using is going to be one that's rated for 6500K, which is the amount of Kelvin that you really want to look for as far as plant growth goes. So yeah, make sure you look for that whenever it comes to plants. It'll have the full spectrum that the plants like to have. So that's kind of that for lighting. The difference between that and LED is LED never really you're gonna switch the bulbs out. They last for a really long time. At the same time, they are better on your electric bill. So that's something else to consider. I just don't think they're strong enough. The ones, they also cost more initially, which is another thing that I don't like. But you need a lot more LED bulbs than a TA bulb in comparison to match up, because they're just not as strong unless you have a lot of LED lights. But yeah, that's kind of why I'm just going with a TA bulb as of right now. I will have to replace that bulb every like 6 months to like a year, but I just think that for this particular tank, I'm just going to go with the TA as opposed to LED. I ran LEDs in the past, and they just haven't been strong enough for the plants that I like to grow, so we'll see what this TA does for as far as lighting goes. So step number 7, we have to look at our decorations. It's really up to preference. You just have to make sure that your decorations that you're using are aquarium safe, and you never want to put anything into your water that it would be concerning if it wouldn't be aquarium safe. For example, some great things that you should put in your water would be rocks, driftwood, anything at your local fish store that's listed as a decoration. You do have to be careful about rocks. I wouldn't put anything like that you gather in the woods or anything like that in your aquarium, because that can have something that messes with the pH of the water, and it messes with a lot of other things in the water. So I would say for the most part, stick to getting rocks at your local fish store, just so that you don't leak anything into the water. As far as pH swings, you don't want to have any of those. So yeah, just look for the decorations at your local fish store and look whatever you like, whatever you're looking for. Look for good hiding places if you have a lot of fish that don't like to be out during the day and are nocturnal, things like roaches or catfish. Yeah, look for some hiding places for them. So it's great to have decorations. The decorations that we're going to be using this driftwood here, and then we have these rocks, which look pretty cool. I like the design on these guys. You'll be able to see the tank a little bit better. I think it looks a lot better whenever it actually is underwater, but you will see it eventually. Now we're looking at step number 8, which are the plants like that I was talking about. The plants that I'm planning on using for this are probably going to be some dwarf crypts. Some good foreground plants that you could use that usually are pretty good for beginners, or you could use dwarf tears, but you have to make sure that they're not baby dwarf tears, because those guys are a little more challenging. You have to make sure they're just called dwarf tears. You can't have baby in front of them. Otherwise, it'll be a little bit more challenging than just regular dwarf tears. Dwarf Sage is also a great carpeting plant, and Microsword is a decent one as far as carpeting goes. What I would suggest to most beginners is stick with the Dwarf Sage. But I'm going to be going with a type of crypt, and I actually have it in my other aquarium, so I'm just planning on kind of clipping off some of the growth that happened with them. I'll just use some of the runners that they produced to kind of put in this tank, and then hopefully they'll grow fairly well. If they're growing pretty well in my other tank, I'm pretty confident that they'll grow pretty well in this one, because this one will have a stronger light. And just, they have similar, I used Eco Complete in both of the tanks, so, you know, it's not like one has more nutrients, but I'm fairly certain that they'll grow faster and better in this tank. So that's what we're using as far as a background plant goes. As far as like a mid-ground plant, just kind of the ones that grow a little bit taller, probably around your like 6-inch to like 12-inch range. This is a 10-gallon, so we're not going to be using any background plants that grow past a foot, basically, is what I consider a background plant. But basically, as far as your like mid-ground, middle-of-the-line plants, as far as growth-wise, that's kind of going to be considered your background plant, if you ask me, as far as setting up your tank. So some of those would be like your Java Fern, some Ludwigia, and some Rhotalas. They're kind of be what you consider your mid-of-the-line plants. And as far as background goes, you can have your Amazon swords. Those would be considered backgrounds because they grow fairly tall. Anacris, it grows fairly tall, but at the same time, it doesn't require too much light. It does require some, but not ridiculously strong ones. Yeah, and then Hornwort also grows fairly quickly as well under not so bright of a light. It's a pretty hardy plant as well. So that's another plant that you can look for as a beginner. And then step number 9 we're going to be looking at the advantages and disadvantages of using CO2 in your planet aquarium. For beginners that are setting up your aquarium, you don't really have to look into this because you would never use CO2 in an aquarium that doesn't have plants in it. There are a few types of CO2. You can do liquidized CO2, which is probably what I'm going to end up doing. The other option is you can do a regulator, CO2 regulator, which is going to have, it has advantages and disadvantages. The biggest one is you have to make sure you have a very strong or reliable CO2 regulator, because if it breaks, it can crash your entire tank. You never want to run your CO2 regulator whenever your lights aren't on, because they only photosynthesize and will turn your CO2 into oxygen whenever the light is on. So your plants that aren't, and your fish that aren't able to breathe the CO2 and breathe the oxygen aren't going to be happy whenever there's no oxygen left for them, because the CO2 is taking up all of it. So you want to make sure that you only run your CO2 whenever the lights are on in your aquarium. In this aquarium, I'm not running a regulator or anything like that. I'm just running liquidized CO2 in the form of Flourish XL, which is a great product that I would suggest using weekly as far as your plants go. It's just really reliable, and it'll help with growth. Any form of CO2 will help with growth, but yeah, just Flourish XL for beginners is really the best way to go as far as planted tanks go. I don't like CO2 regulators anyway, because they're just too unreliable in my opinion, so that's just my take on it. It's up to you what you want to try, and I would never be doing a video about CO2 regulators just because I hate them and I would never use one in my tank. So, sorry, but I'm not going to do it. And then step number 2, we're going to be talking about supplements, which is what I was talking about. Flourish XL is kind of a version of a supplement in a planet aquarium, which is, you have iron, which is usually pretty good for your red plants. Most red plants use that iron to actually show the great colors that they have. So that's kind of, yeah, for supplements, that's all I'm really going to use is Flourish XL and iron in this particular aquarium. Others that you can use are, I think, phosphates. You can use some of those. You don't want to use too much of them. Otherwise you might have some algae blooms. But yeah, as far as your bread and butter goes, as far as supplements, iron and liquidized CO2 are kind of your basic ones that a lot of people look for. You can also do root taps if you really want, but just for the fact that I'm using Eco Complete, which will already have the nutrients that the taps would provide, I'm not going to be using those guys. And then step number 11, we have to be looking at the water. I already showed you the nitrogen cycle and setting up for your first aquarium, so you guys should probably check out that video just to kind of learn a little bit more about the nitrogen cycle in your aquarium. But we want to make sure that we also use the chlorinator. So as far as what we can use in our fish tanks, water-wise, you can use tap water, just regular tap water, and any tank that you start for the most part. If you're doing tetras, then it's okay to use tap water as long as you dechlorinate the water. And then people talk about advantages and disadvantages of using deionized or reverse osmosis water in your planet aquarium, but in a planet aquarium I would definitely suggest using at least a little bit of tap water, because it will have some trace elements in it that the plants will actually enjoy. It will have trace elements of that phosphate and that iron that they'll actually really enjoy to get supplemented with, which is why I say use tap water with a mix of RO water. But I just am probably going to use straight tap water on this guy because I don't have any fish that are pretty sensitive. Like if I were running discus on a bigger tank, then they would prefer, I'd probably mix tap water with RO water because they do prefer a lower pH, and their RO water will provide a lower pH when mixed with the tap water. But on this particular one, I'm just going to use regular tap water with dechlorinator because the trace elements that the plants do love. So next we're going to be talking about The fish themselves, some great beginner fish are going to be like white skirt tetras, black skirt tetras, really a lot of the common tetras you want to look at. Always do research on the fish before doing it. Make sure that that fish that you research actually fits in your aquarium. Look at the size, look at the minimum size aquarium, go to your local fish store, look at the fish they have. Ask the people working there about the fish. Just learn as much as you can about it before actually buying it and taking it home. The ones that I'm using are going to be killifish, neon tetras, things that are going to be suitable for a 10-gallon aquarium, really. I'm not going to be putting any big Oscars or anything in here that would completely mess up the plants, but at the same time would outgrow the tank. And then a misconception actually is that the fish will grow to the size of your aquarium. Yes, they do on the outside, but internally their organs will keep growing until they crush against each other and eventually cause a slow, painful death. So try to keep the tank as big as possible whenever you're keeping fish in it, and make sure that it's actually accurate for the fish's size. And never try to fit a goldfish in a bowl. That's just a complete no. No go on that one. You don't want to do that. And then what we're going to do next is step 13, which is going to be the food that you want to grow. Food that you're going to be feeding your fish. As far as this tank, I'm just going to be doing flakes. Really any tropical flake, because I am having tropical fish. It will be okay to use pellets. I know people will prefer, and usually they do pack a little more nutrients. But the fish I've been feeding pellets to, and the place where I got my fish from just have been eating pellets in general, so I'm just going to be sticking with a tetra pellet, or sorry, tetra flake, so just to kind of keep with their diet that they already ate. I don't want to change it up on them. So that's just kind of what I feed these particular ones. So let's take on the actual tank build itself. Let's get started.
Alright guys, so what we have to do after you've already discussed the parts of the aquarium and what you've already gotten, step one is actually to rinse off the materials that you're going to use, the tank itself. If the tank is not going to be light enough to where you can actually lift it and rinse it and put in a sink, then what I suggest doing is completely filling up the tank, wash it down with a paper towel, and then I would drain it. Besides that, anything that you're going to put in the tank, such as decorations, substrate, sand, gravel, I suggest you rinse that off before actually putting it in the tank itself. And the only thing is, I'm not going to do the substrate because I'm using Eco-Complete, and they say to not actually rinse it off before using it, and also because I'm planning on just filling it up and draining it a few times anyway, just so that I won't have that much cloudy water in it. So I will be back with you guys after I rinse all this stuff off. Alright guys, so after I rinsed off the driftwood, I filled up a 5-gallon bucket basically with boiling water, at least as close as I could. I used the hottest that I could possibly use on just the tap water that I have, and I'm just kind of letting the driftwood sit in it. It's two advantages. First off, it's going to help it sink whenever you actually put it in the tank itself, and second off, sometimes they'll leach tannins into the water, which will actually lower your pH. So what this does, it'll kind of release the tannins so you don't have any pH swings whenever you first set up your aquarium, so it just makes it a little more stable. So that's what I'm going to be doing while I start setting up and before I actually add the decoration. It's a good idea kind of to do this a day before, just let it soak for a day, but it's okay if I do it right now. But yeah, we'll check back on this whenever I get the substrate in and the water, and then we'll see what we can do. Alright guys, so I just finished rinsing off the decorations. I just finished the driftwood, putting it in the bucket, and boiling water. So now what we're actually going to do is we're going to be filling this guy up with the substrate. That's kind of our next step. What I'm planning on doing is I'm going to be using this sand on the right side, and I'll be using this Eco-Complete, which is like a Planet Aquarium substrate. I'll be using this kind of like as an edge. It's kind of hard and complicated to explain, so I'll show you after I have it all set up. Alright guys, so a little bit of time has passed, and this is kind of my idea for the hardscape. As you can see, we kind of have that sand in front, and then we have the Eco-Complete that I was talking about back there. We have our decorations in already. That was kind of my idea with the two rocks and the driftwood there. My hardscape is basically your aquascape, which is all your decorations and your sand and your substrate and other things before you actually put any plants in or anything like that. As far as the plants I'm thinking about using, I still haven't completely decided yet. I might do a type of hardy crypt like I talked about as far as a carboning plant. And in the sand, I'm not really planning on doing anything. In the back, I'm still looking at like a mid-ground plant. It'd be pretty cool to put in, one that might flower maybe even, so I'll see what I have on that. But yeah, that's kind of my idea with the aquascape. I'm also going to be putting in the filter, I'll be filling up with water, and then after that I will show you guys the final result. But let's just take a look. You can't really tell the eco-complete when my tanks are kind of on a timer and they kind of shut off already, so it's not as bright, but you can see pretty much the idea right now. Until I can get the hood on, I'll be able to give you a better look at the aquarium as a whole. So I'll see you guys a little bit later, and then we can take a better look at the aquarium. Alright guys, so this is kind of the idea for the hardscape, and this is going to be before I add any plants. It's completely filled up, it has the light on it and everything, so basically the last step I have is going to be to get some plants. You can see what that'll be like a little bit later, but as of for now, I think I'm kind of end this here. I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to show you a shot with the plants, but yeah, this is kind of my hardscape, and then a little bit later on we'll be able to see what plants I decide to use. I went with an aqua clear as the filter, as you can see back there. They're kind of my favorite, and then we have that power head over there that's supposed to help with the plants. You will notice that the tank is obviously a little bit cloudy. That's completely normal for a tank that's newly set up, and especially with the substrate that I use. So a little bit later on, I'm sure it'll go back to normal. But yeah, I'm not going to add the fish until a little bit later, because they're in their other tank, and I need the heater in still, so. Alright guys, I'll see you guys next time.